thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. My name is Kimberly, and I'm a Customer Success Manager at YCharts. And hosting our webinar today is my colleague, Account Executive Jean Romero. For today's webinar, we will focus on how to best utilize YCharts to stay alert during market volatility. Throughout the webinar, we'll have a live Q&A via the chat section on the lower right corner of the webinar. We'll do our best to answer all those questions at the end of the webinar, but any that remain unanswered will be answered by your support contact. Please keep in mind that the content of this webinar is meant for educational purposes only and is not intended to be used as investment advice, nor is YCharts acting as an advising party regarding client funds in any way. As always, a recording of the webinar will be made available on the website as well as will be sent via email to all attendees. And now I will turn it over to Jean to get us started.
Thanks, Kimberly, and thanks to all of you for joining today. During today's webinar, we will be talking about recent market conditions, how to set up your YCharts account with different dashboards and alerts, and some cool tools to leverage during these volatile periods. Before we get into YCharts, let me just begin with a fun fact here. The Volatility Index traded at above 15 for 7 days in all of 2017. However, in 2018 alone, it has been above 15 for 49 trading days. This can be attributed to a variety of factors, but a few that might play into it are rising interest rates, potential trade wars between the US and China, and privacy concerns with companies like Facebook. Now let's jump into YCharts and show you how you can stay on top of all of this. Here I'm in my YCharts dashboard. What I really appreciate about the YCharts dashboard is the ability to set up the account to look and feel however you'd like. What you'll notice here is that I have a list of the FANG stocks right up here at the top. Now, we already mentioned Facebook, but Amazon has also been in the news with a recent presidential Twitter rant. So I want to be able to stay on top of all of this, and one great way to do this is to be able to come into these tabs up here along the top. You'll notice that this News tab will put stories only related to these companies right here at the top of my account. I can also set alerts on these companies by coming into this options drop-down at the top of the watch list and going to create and edit alerts. Just as an example, if I want to be notified if any of these companies drop 5% in one given day, all I have to do is come in to enter a metric, type 1 day returns, and then I'm going to say less than -5. Make sure you hit enter so that the system accepts that as a metric and hit create. And now whenever any of these companies fall 5% in a given day, you will be notified of that. Furthermore, let's kind of construct these accounts and these dashboards to touch on some of the points that we mentioned. I'm going to start in this dashboard on the far right-hand side at the top called Volatility. Here you'll see a list of mutual funds that I use in some different models, and on the right-hand side, some charts that I find kind of interesting. This allows me to track the markets, monitor interest rates, and if I want to add that VIX chart, I simply come in to create a new chart, give it a name, search for it here, VIX, and it's going to be under indexes. For indexes, you want to use the financial metric level, and that's it. Save that chart, and now it'll be on the right-hand side of your screen there. Now, as I look at these funds, I want to see where I might be susceptible to volatility, uncertainty, and risk. I also like the ability to come into this data tab at the top and customize this data view to have the metrics that I want to view. You'll see expense ratio, yield, returns, and then a couple risk metrics here. However, I want to dig in deeper into some of the risk metrics that we want to evaluate for these funds. So I'm going to come into our Comp Tables tool. Once again, just go to the Options drop-down at the top here, select View In, and then go to Comp Tables. That will bring this list of 10 mutual funds into our Comp Tables tool. Now, I'm going to remove those two columns with the currency and the price. Now you can set up various metric sets using this financial metrics browse, but I already have a metric set that I created, and I'm going to open that up here. It's called my volatility metrics. Once I click that, then it will plot a variety of columns that I can evaluate these funds on. We touched on the impending trade wars between the US and China, so I'm going to add the financial metric Chinese exposure. I simply type in this financial metrics search bar up at the top, and as I start typing China, we'll see China bond exposure, total exposure, and equity exposure. I'm going to select total exposure right there. If you ever want to sort these funds based on any of these columns, simply click once at the top of the column to sort low to high, or twice to sort high to low. Another great tool within YCharts that we've discussed in previous webinars is the ability to rank these funds based on your own weighted criteria. To do that, hover over scoring models and click into it. I have a variety of saved scores. This one that I'm going to open is our April webinar, Fees and Risk. You'll see that I threw in about 5 different metrics here, weighted in different proportions depending on their level of importance to me. Now, we pushed all of these to your accounts, so if you want to leverage this for your own use, please feel free. Just go into scoring models and shared with me. Now, I'm going to add that score column, and what you'll see over here on the right-hand side of my screen is that these are sorted in sequential order. When I click once again, it goes low to high, so higher values are going to be worse. So if I click again, it will sort them there. Interestingly enough, this Davis International Fund isn't ranking too highly based on my risk score here. Might be susceptible to some volatility. So let's kind of find out some more information about this fund. I'm going to go to Add Info columns at the top here. Let's see what category this is in. Now I've added an informational category to see that this is my Foreign Large Growth Fund. From here, I'm going to go in to the Mutual Fund Screening tool to try and look for funds that might be a better replacement to that Davis International Fund. I'm going to hover over the Tools dropdown up at the top, go to Fund Screener, and now I'm going to open up a saved screen that I have here called Foreign Growth Funds. This has also been shared with all of you. It's a simple starting universe of mutual funds that are in the category Foreign Large Growth and open to new investors. Now you can slice and dice from here however you'd like, but I'm going to apply a couple of risk metrics here that I think will be important. I'm going to come in to add a metric filter at the top here, use our type search to look at that standard deviation with a 5-year look back right there. When I select that, we saw that that Davis fund was above 15%, so I'm going to look for funds that are less than 15%, less than 15, and hit enter, and then hit submit. That'll bring our universe down to 78 funds. Next up, I would also like to find a fund that is less expensive than that Davis fund. I'm going to come in to add a metric filter, and I'm looking for funds that have an expense ratio less than 1%. Expense ratio less than 1%, and I'm going to hit submit again there. Lastly, I don't want to be overexposed to China given the volatility in the markets, so I'm going to come in to add a metric filter once again and search on that China total exposure. Now, I don't have a value in mind that I want to say it needs to be less than, so I'm going to look at this remaining list of 51 funds, and I'm going to say, you know what, YCharts, show me the top 25th percentile, so the top quartile, but lower values have to be better there, and hit submit. Now we're down to a very manageable list of 13 mutual funds. We can begin dissecting these. I always put a little bit of stock in management tenure, so now I'm going to come over here and add additional information. You'll see add metric columns right next to scoring models, and all I'm going to do is search the word tenure and add that as a metric column there. Lastly, to compare apples to apples, I'm going to add that same score that we used in the comp tables to this remaining list of funds. Once again, scoring models, April webinar, add score column, and now we will have these replacement funds sequentially ranked based on that fee and risk score. Interesting that that DFA fund comes up number 1. However, I put a stock in management tenure, so I'm actually going to look in this Oppenheimer fund. Let's do a quick eyeball and compare that versus that Davis fund. Simply click into the mutual fund there on the left-hand side via the hyperlink. You can always look at the key stats on these mutual fund overview pages, but I'm going to come directly into YCharts. Let's do a 10-year look back. So up at the top of my screen here, I'm going to hit 10-year. I'm going to add in that Davis fund on the left-hand side of my screen under that securities search bar, DILCX. Put that in. And now you're comparing the two funds head-to-head with a 10-year look back. A great feature within our charting tool is being able to gray out U.S. recessions. So I'm going to select that in this chart options dropdown. And now we'll see those two funds head-to-head. As you can see, the Oppenheimer fund didn't get hit as hard during the recessionary period of 2008 and 2009 and has really responded well since then, even beating that Davis fund. Now that's all well and good, but let's see how that might affect some of our models and our portfolios. From here, I'm going to come into our Tools dropdown and go to Excel. I know many of you have worked with our Excel team closely. Always remember that we have a repository of templates here at the top that make these very, very accessible. The one that I want to work with today is going to be our portfolio side-by-side comparison. Simply download it and then follow the instructions on the disclaimer page. To open this up, let me scroll up here to the top. This was our initial model here, incorporating that Davis fund on row 20 here. Now, as I scroll over to the right, we're going to be able to see how this allocation performed during a recessionary period by setting a custom date range in column AN on the far right-hand side. As I scroll down, I'm going to compare this portfolio versus our model using that Oppenheimer fund below. Same allocation, however, a different fund. As I scroll down, you'd always be able to compare this versus a benchmark index or a blended benchmark index here. If you want to evaluate at the fund level, simply click into any of these tabs at the bottom. As an example, if I come to this risk tab, you'll see here that the standard deviation for that Oppenheimer fund is at about 11%. However, for that Davis International, it's up here at 15%. All of these calculations wrap up really nicely into this two-page report that will allow me to compare the two portfolios head-to-head. Here is our current portfolio on the left-hand side and the model on the right-hand side. At first glance, I'd love to see that the yield is higher with the expense ratio being lower in our model. As I kind of come down the line here, we have a lot of great and interesting statistics on each portfolio side by side. However, I'm going to focus on this trailing return section. Here under the 10-year look back, you can see that our model has actually outperformed our current portfolio. And as I scroll down, we're going to look at the regional exposures where our current portfolio has an 11% exposure to Asia, and our model is at about 8.5%. That being said, hopefully we are mitigating our risk with any sort of impending trade wars, and we are doing a great job for our clients in selecting the best funds to limit our expenses and increase income. I'm going to come back into YCharts and now open it up so Kimberly can answer some questions.
Great, thank you, Gene. We had a few questions come in during the course of the webinar, so I'll focus on a few of the key ones. The first one that a few people asked was, can I add alerts on the VIX? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Just the same way that you would add an alert for any individual equity or any fund or ETF, you can do the same for any of our indices. So we do see a lot of advisors who want to be kept abreast of what's going on in terms of volatility. We'll often see them adding a metric alert to be notified when the level for the VIX exceeds 15. The next question is, how am I alerted and how frequently will alerts be sent to me? This is a great question because you can actually you're able to customize it quite a bit. If you're in your dashboard at the very bottom of that page and it may be minimized, that's where you're going to see any watch list news or alerts reside. So if you click on that cog or that gearbox there, under create or delete alerts, that will open the alerts manager. This is where you can create any new alert, and you can also customize it, whether you want to receive alerts by email daily or change any sort of frequency there so it's most useful for you. Another question that we received has to deal with comp tables. So the question is, in comp tables, can I add securities in addition to my watch list? Yes, absolutely. So the nice thing about comp tables is you can pull in any watch list, any individual security, any saved screen that you've created. And in addition, for example, if you wanted to pull in a watch list and then add an individual security, perhaps an ETF to use as a benchmark, that's something you can do in that top left corner where it says securities. And I think we have one last question. I think will resonate with quite a few of you. It reads, I get a ton of client calls per day, especially during market swings. Where can I go for quick information on a company when a client calls me? If you know what company you want to look at, that's really where the company page is, and that first quote page is going to be the most useful. So you can use that top search bar at the top to type either the company name or the ticker, and that will take you directly to the quote page. This is nice because it provides you with a snapshot of those key statistics, which you'll see in the top center. Those will show you key statistics, for example, beta, debt to equity ratio, and so forth. And you'll notice for each of them, there's an icon next to it where you can click through and actually pull that into a chart automatically. I'll also point out on the right-hand side of that page, you'll see the analyst coverage section. This can be really important because it's critical to stay abreast of what analysts are saying about a certain company, and you can also see how that's changed over time. Also within that section, you'll notice we've recently added that target price. So you'll see the price and then the target price as well as the price target upside. This can be really powerful, especially during times of volatility, because it really keeps you it allows you to stay abreast of what analysts are saying. And especially, during times like this, it helps you differentiate between some of the noise that comes along with volatile markets versus what are actual changes in street sentiment. So I think that's all the time we have for questions today. As always, a recording of the webinar will be made available on the website within the support section, and it will also be sent via email to all attendees. So with that, I thank everyone for your time today and have a great rest of your day.